So hey guys, I want to start issue 8 with a cup of coffee, obviously, with a bit of a rant. So what I'm mainly going to talk about came up in another part work, the Eddie Stobart part work actually. However, it's an argument that comes up with all part works, will probably come up at some point with the Lancaster part work, and you could argue will come up in my build. And the question is, sometimes you get an issue that doesn't have many parts. Now unfortunately I'm going to be making a lot of references to the Eddie Stobart, but it will be relevant to the Lancaster. One of the latest issues that we've got with Eddie Stobart consists of two little pieces of metal which you screw together with two screws. That's it. Someone has argued that for £9.99 for one issue, that is a complete rip-off. Now I'm going to quote Scott here, that is not how it works. When you are buying into a part work, you should be going in open-eyed. You shouldn't be looking at the issue price. You should be looking at the total cost of the entire model. Now this Lancaster is going to cost, bear with me a sec, I've actually forgotten how much it's going to cost. So 130 issues, it is going to cost us £1,415.70 for 130 issues, priced at £10.99 an issue, with one at £6.99 and one at £1.99. Now, some of the issues that you're going to get in the Lancaster are going to be minuscule. You may even get an issue where they say, here's an LED, that's it. Now, that is actually a rip-off. If you're going to say things are rip-offs, no one's ever complained about LEDs, but do you know what it costs to produce one LED and two pieces of wire? I'll tell you, about 3 or 4 pence. I buy my LEDs from AliExpress, Banggood, that kind of place, and they come out at about 1 or 2 pence a bulb. And then you got a couple of bits of wire, which is a few quid for 10 meters. You cut a couple of lengths of wire off, solder it on the end, you're talking 2 or 3 pence. You're paying £10.99 for that issue. But no one ever says an LED is a rip-off, because you plug it in. Oh, sorry, you got the JST bit connector on the end. Because everyone goes, oh, it does something. 2 lumps, hungry great lumps of metal, which costs a lot more than an LED, I'm pretty sure. Oh, that's a rip-off. Then, with the case of the Eddie Stobart, I don't know if you can see my Eddie Stobart on the shelf. It's actually hidden, so you can't see it. We got in one issue the cab. It was about this big, hung and great big bit of metal. I don't think they produced that. I think that was what they call a loss leader. I think they lost money on that cab. But no one ever says, oh, this cab is too big. We've got too much stuff for our money. They should have cut the cab in half and given it to us in 2 pieces. No, they always forget about that. When you are doing a part work, you need to look at the total cost. So don't look at it as £10.99 an issue. Look at it as £1,400 for an entire model. You are going to end up at 130 weeks with an entire model. Now, the reason this is relevant for my scale model build, you'll see that sometimes I have to slow things down. A good example of that is my pilot seat. Because of things that are going on with deliveries and stuff like that, it's taken me 3 issues to build that, which is actually slower than the Hachette. The Hachette version got the pilot seat in one go, all painted up, all nice. But I think we're building the pilot, so I'm trying to put that back into the cockpit so I don't get it damaged. I really do like that. I'm really happy with what I've got so far. So the Hachette cockpit is still being built up. I'm actually recording this before I've seen issue 8. I don't think you can think issue 8 is released in the shops at the time of filming this. But I think we've been doing the cockpit of the Hachette one for about 3 maybe 4 weeks. So you could argue that's slow. £40 for a cockpit. But you can't, I'm going to quote it again. It doesn't work like that. So it does make me a little bit upset when people say, you know, people have been doing, I mean, the Eddie Stobart is, excuse me, sorry, this is actually the piece in question. This is issue 126. This is what you get for £10, and all it is two pieces of metal, a little bracket and a couple of screws. You screw it together and that's it. That's the way it goes. But you know, if this was a Games Workshop figure, this would be £15. No one ever complains about that. Well, they do. But you've got yourself a nice highly detailed figure for £15. This is £10. I'm pretty sure the profit margin on this is a lot lower than if they give us an LED. I've just done the ET and I've done the finger, and all I really got in the one issue was an LED and a little bit of cheap plastic. I'm using the word cheap because plastic isn't expensive. It was a good quality bit of plastic. But the point I'm making is every single issue, maybe bar one or two, this one they're making a lot of money on probably. But every issue they're a business. They need to make money. They need to sell things at a higher price. Everything you see in this screen has been sold to me for more money than it cost them to produce. That heater there cost me about 30 quid, 20 quid, I don't know what it costs. Didn't cost that much to make. The cardboard box over there, I can't get that cardboard box. These drawers are like 20 quid. The guy who makes them, it costs them. So yeah, they all need to make a profit. Some issues they're going to make more profit than others. I suspect some issues they're losing money. If you go back through my issues and find my Eddie Stobart cab, I actually thought that was a bad issue. Most people looked at it and went, oh, look at this cab, it's huge, it's heavy, it's highly detailed, it's all painted up, it's lovely. I thought it was a bad issue because we didn't do any building. I opened the box, there's the cab. That's the end of my video, guys. Thank you for watching. I thought that was a terrible issue. These, I thought they were good issues because I'm going to end up with a little piece of structure to add to it. So yeah, guys, sorry to go off on a rant. So if you are doing the Hachette Lancaster and you're watching this as a comparison as opposed to doing the scale model, cancel now if you don't want these little pieces. But you're going to get issues. I suspect the wing. When you get the wing, you're going to go, oh, so much for my money. But you're not going to go, oh, that's too much, cut it in half. But you'll be sitting there going, oh, we've got 3 or 4 screws and a small piece of metal. You know, I know Hachette have made a lot of money on what they've been producing so far. This is issue 8. So you would have spent almost £75 on the Lancaster so far, and it hasn't cost them £75 to produce what you've got so far. You're going to have something that looks roughly that big, roughly that size, and it's going to weigh a ton because it's made of die-cast metal, and you're going to be excited. But if you start looking at individual issues, you're going to start looking at this as a con. But by human nature, you look at the tiny issues. I mean, that's not even a tiny issue. But yeah, to call that a waste of £10, I think is a little bit out of order. Because you look at that issue and go, there isn't much to do. That's a waste of money. But when you get the hunk and great big bits, we've had issues when we're working on the engine. It took me an hour to do. I thought that was great value for money. But you've got to look at the whole model, not the cost of the individual. What is it they say? Legion. The sum of the parts is greater than the whole. If you break it down into individual pieces at $10.99, you're going to go, this is a waste of money. If you look at the entire model at less than 1,500 quid, I think you've got yourself a really good model for the money. Anyway, rant over. Let's have a look at what they're doing in issue 9 in Hachette land, and then we'll get on with some, let's call it super detailing.
Okay, so let's take a look what comes inside this one. So we've got some windows, we've got some levers, panel there, and we have a large piece of metal. There we go. So I can already see we're going to put some windows in here.
So this is stage 8 of the Hachette Lancaster. This is details for the cockpit. If you go over to watch his video, it's 17 minutes 26 seconds long. I've actually cut it down to 9 minutes and 4 seconds, which is the length of the build. The other 8-ish minutes, 7.5 minutes, is filled with wonderful stories. He does actually go on after the build, and he does have a really interesting channel. So check the link below to have a look at the full video. So, as in his own words, it's not a lot to do, but some really nice details. And what we're basically going to be doing is adding to the cockpit assembly from previous issues. So, you know, if you look at mine and you see that I'm dragging it out, yes, I am a little bit, but then no more than Hachette does. Now, when the first part is actually fitting extra details to the cockpit, and Scott follows a very simple rule. If it doesn't need gluing, you don't glue it. He does what he calls an earthquake test, which is he places a part in and then he shakes the hell out of it. If it falls out, he's going to glue it in. If it doesn't fall out, well, if it survives the earthquake test, it's going to survive sitting on a display stand. So yeah, and then the last thing that you want to do is add the windows. Now, Building with the Boys is using micro crystal clear. I personally would be happy with PVA glue, and I think once that's all assembled, that's going to be quite sturdy, and they just go in quite nice and simple. So to finish this off, I've given you 3 screenshots. One is the finished details in the cockpit, and you've got to admit that looks absolutely amazing. The second picture is the windows been put in. Now, he does admit this as well. It does look a little bit ugly because the glue is still wet. Once the glue is wet, it is white and it's opaque. Once it dries perfectly clear and you'll never know there's any glue there. And then the third picture is just simply the windows from the opposite side. So yeah, well done, Scott. Really good build this week. So hi guys, so in the last video we painted our figure, and I do want to stress again, these pilots are optional. So all of this that we're doing in the last issue, or the last video and this video, is all optional. And if you do get your pilots or your crew, and you get your and you decide to paint him, this is where you could stop. He's he's a lovely little figure actually. So I painted him in the last issue, but I want to super detail him, what I call super detail, which is mean taking it to another level. This is what, if you were doing fantasy miniature painting, this is what you would consider tabletop standard. So to give you an idea of a tabletop standard, from about this distance he looks good, but what we're looking for is something that looks good from about that distance, so a lot closer. Now you may notice one change with him. I've gone through how to thin paints, how to prime paints, etc, etc. To do what we're about to do, we're going to be adding either enamel or oil washers, and they do go best over oil, over gloss varnish. So last night I've given him a gloss varnish and I've left him overnight, so it's now the next day, so he's a little bit shiny. When we finished him, we will go over with a matte varnish. Right, so what is an enamel and what is an oil wash? Well, enamel washers, and I've just recently bought these. I've never really used them that well. I've used them a couple of times, but I've bought a complete set. They were a little bit discounted. These are Tamiya panel line accent colours, and if you have these will do the job very, very well. And what you do is, if you have, say for example, a dark grey aircraft, these have really settled. These come in, these pretty much look like your Tamiya Extra Thins. In fact, I'd like to bet it's the same bottle. Let's have a look. I've got my little glue holder here. Yeah, look, they're the same bottles with a different colour cap. So if you've got, I bought this glue holder. It just helps. You see, I got it from Ultimate Products. In fact, we'll use that to try them out. Yeah, I bought this because I do have a habit of knocking things. So if I knock this, it just sort of helps. So what you do with these, let's tell you what, let's go for the black one. So these look exactly the same as thin, but don't try to glue parts with them. So this is an enamel. It's all the same, but look, you get your little applicator, and what you do is you just dot into the recessed detail a little bit of the wash, and you see it just starts to help bring out the detail just by changing the colour a bit. This isn't perfect because I've done this on 3D printed plastic, but it kind of demonstrates the principle. So you see it starts, apart from the fact that you've got 3D print lines, it just starts to bring that detail out. And that's what we're going to do today. Now, if you have these washers, we can skip the next step because I'm a bit of a skinflint. I don't even know why I bought these, to be absolutely honest with you, because I do like to use oil washers. So what is an oil wash? So what we're going to do, sorry, there's the range that I've bought. Invasion of a cat. Sorry, bear with me one sec. So my apologies for that small intrusion. So, right, what have I done? I have got some oil paints. Now, you may hear hobbyists raving on about certain brands of oil paint. These are actually the oils paints that I've been using for well over a year. This particular set came from Castle. I can't remember the price of them. I think they were about 10 or 20 pounds for the entire set. Sorry, and I'm still getting the entire set out. The entire setup is 24 paints, and I have a feeling I've just dropped one and lost one. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Yeah, I've actually lost. Oh, maybe they were set at 20. No, there's definitely another one in there. Another 2. I've dropped 2. So I am missing 2. Sorry guys, I might have to take a cut while I find them. I put them all in a little holder and they've actually fallen. So these are all my oil paints. I'm one missing. So they range in colours that we will never use. Probably never use this pink. We've got yellows, we've got flesh colours, we've got scarlet, we've got so many different reds and so many different browns. We've got blacks, etc, etc. And what we are going to do is we're going to thin this right down to make a wash. We're then going to paint certain areas of the figure, and what that wash is going to do is going to settle down in the recesses. And the basic principle is, if you want to make something, if you have a look at my jumper, can you see that there's creases and folds? Now if you look at in the recesses, it's actually darker, and then right on the very top it's much lighter, and your mid-tone is around about there. We've actually painted this in the mid-tones, so what we want to do is we want to make these recesses darker, and that's where the oil washers come in, and then we'll repaint over it, missing certain bits out, the mid and the top tone, and then we'll add in some detail on the top, and it's really going to make it pop. Now the difference between these and these, essentially dumbing it down, is that give this a good shake. This is ready to go. I'm going to show you how I'm going to get ready with these oil paints. So, to give you a science lesson that does not exceed my own knowledge, these paints, whereas these paints are pigment and acrylic binder and various other stuff, this has got pigments and an oil based binder. Now the oil we don't actually want. So the first thing we need to do, we need to remove the oil from the paints. Now what I've done is, I'm not 100% sure what colours I'm going to need, so I've grabbed every colour that I might need. So what we're going to do, by the way, these will last you years. The idea behind me getting these was I needed a few different colours, so I bought a set. When these do eventually run out, I'll just replace the one. And one tube of this top of the range is still is about the same price as a whole set. You can pick these up from the works for not much. This is actually my most used paint, which is the black. Right, so what we're going to do is we're going to get about a pea-sized amount onto the cardboard, and that cardboard being porous is going to draw all of the oil out. Spread it around a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get all of my colours ready. Oh, don't know what happened there. There we go. It's quite a lot of oil's just come out of that one. That was all sitting at the top. So I might have to give that one a bit of a clean up. And like I say, I'm just getting out all the different colours that I think I'll need. And we just put them onto the cardboard. That lid was a little bit stuck. So I'm not really sure about the blues. So I've got a few. And this is literally how much you'll need per project. We're using quite a lot of colour. Ooh, a lot of oil in that one. I think all the oil has actually come to the top on that one, because you can't really shake these, can you? Oh, that one's not even been opened. Look. There we go. Right, and what we're going to do is ignore that one, because is that one the... Yeah, that's got quite a lot of oil all run to the top. Right, so obviously this one's going to demonstrate quite well because a lot of oil has come out, and this one. But what you'll notice is the oil is going to start to leach out into the cardboard. And what we do is we leave that for about half an hour. Actually, while we're waiting for this to leach out, I'll tell you the other equipment that I use. So these can go to one side. Now, we can't mix these with an acrylic-based medium because it just won't mix. Instead, I use white spirit. As you know, I'm a bit of a skinflint, a bit frugal. A lot of people will use odourless spirits, which is essentially the same thing, but odourless spirits, as the name implies, doesn't have an odour. White spirit does. This white spirit actually came from a bottle. I was very lucky when I moved into my house 3 years ago. This bottle was left in the cupboard. I guess the previous occupants were doing some painting and they left it behind. So I saw it and I'm like, yeah, I'm having that. And what I tend to do is most of my liquids I decant into a big bottle, and I also decant it into a small bottle. It just gives me a lot more control. You are going to need, I use 2 paint brushes, one for mixing. This is an old brush. This is one of these Chinese cheapy horrible ones that I'm just too scared to use because I think I'll get more bristles in the paint than anything else. And then you need a brush that you can paint with. And this for me is the one. So this is going to be my painting brush. This is going to be my mixing brush. I don't like to mix with the brush that I paint with. You're going to also need some kind of mixing vessel. In this particular case, I'm probably going to use these. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's put 4 out, shall we? And that, I believe, is us. You also obviously need your subject matter to paint with, and you will need a little bit of patience because your drying time is going to be quite high. Now, in the time that I've been talking to you, this blue one is starting to leach out quite nicely. So that oil is starting to come out. This one is coming out quite nice. That one not so much. I'm just got a funny feeling about this black, so I'm going to put another blob on, and then yeah, all I can really do now is wait, and then you'll know it's ready because you'll get this big line all around the outside where the oil's starting to come out of that blue one. That, I don't know what happened with that one, but I suppose that's what happens when you buy cheap. You are going to get a bit more hassle and a bit more mess when you buy cheap, but I think the cost saving is worth it. Right guys, I'll see you shortly. Okay, so that has been sitting for a while. I'll be honest with you, I don't know how long that's been sitting there. I basically went away, made a cup of coffee, sat down, watched a Nigel's modelling bench video, and as you can see, a lot of the oil has come out. The longer you leave this, the more oil will come out. You just need to find that compromise. Also, what I did while I was watching the videos, I've got myself some white spirit ready. Obviously, normally when we're painting, we have paint water to clean our brushes with. We can't use that because we're using oil paints, so we need to use white spirit. Something else I forgot to tell you about, kitchen roll. So guys, can we just always assume you're going to need kitchen roll for just about every job? You know, even if you don't use it, it's always handy to have a kitchen roll down on the desk like this. And as you might be able to see from there, I did have a little bit of a spillage because I am that clumsy. But there we go, that's me for you. I also found, I'm quite good at scavenging. I found these ages ago and I just looked at them and went, they'll make great pallets. So what I've done is I've just cut a few off, and they're going to be my mixing pallets for the oil. And this just goes to show how much we're going to need. So we need to look at our model. We need to look at the basic colours. And when I say basic, I mean there's 3 colours there. There's browns. So I'm just trying to bring him down a little bit so you can see him better. So there are browns. So although there's 2 or 3 different types of brown there, there's essentially, well, there's 2 kinds of browns. There's a dark brown, a light brown, and there's a light blue and a dark blue. And what we're looking for is a darker shade. Now, if we used a really dark shade that we use on the trousers for the shirt, I think that'll be too much. So we can also mix colours together. So we could, for example, we could probably use the same blue for both the shirt and the trousers, but for the trousers we'd have to mix some black into it. But I think the 4 colours I'm going to use is this yellow ochre. The only trouble with these paints, especially the cheaper ones, is the colours on the tubes don't even nearly match the colours of the actual paint. Like you see, that yellow ochre doesn't look anything like that yellow ochre. And these 2 blues, I think that's cobalt blue, and that one I think is cerulean, I don't know, I can't pronounce it, but this light blue, I think. No, that's actually that one. So that means the cobalt blue is this one. Yes. So I'm liking that cobalt blue. Sorry, you can't even see it, can you guys? So I'm liking the cobalt blue. So what we're going to do, let's start in the middle, shall we? So what we're going to do is we're going to get some of our paint, and we're going to pop it into the palette. Make sure you get enough in there, and we're going to add some white spirit. I'm going to get some more oil in there. Going to get a lot more oil in there, and you want to really heavily thin it down, and I mean rather heavy. You can see how thin that is. That's no consistency to it at all, and we'll just touch it on there, and yeah, that's nice. If anything, that might be a little bit too heavy. Okay, So now I like to use a small brush if I'm doing small details, but what we're going to do, we'll just brush that on there, and I can see that's actually too light. That's fine. So what we can then do is let's maybe mix a little bit of darker brown in there, and it's all trial and error. There we go. Look, I've just put a tiny touch of brown in there. May need to thin it again. I think that'll be okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just dry my brush off, and I'm going to go over it with a dry brush, and that's going to soak up some of that oil on there, and then we'll give that another try. There, perfect. Right, so one thing you probably didn't spot on there, and I'll do it on the back, this will act very much like Tamiya Extra Thin in like the capillary action. And then what we'll do is as you touch it on, it runs into all of the recesses, and it starts to just pick up that detail, and we just go over the whole lot. That might actually be a little bit too thick, but that's okay. It did work really well on the front, but what we're going to do is we're just going to paint all of the brown bits, and I think we'll do the skin in this colour as well. So any of the brown bits we just go over with the oil. I don't know if you can actually see that, guys. I'm trying to bring the camera in so you can see it, but at the same time it's harder to keep it on camera. Right, so now this is something I want to talk about. I did conveniently ignore it in the last video. You'll notice that the face, I didn't do any eyes. If I was a really skilled painter, far beyond the level that I'm at now, I would be painting those eyes. Because of the scale of him, I'm not going to do that. All I'm going to do, I'm just going to slap in some wash, and like a miracle, some eyes appear. Now, this one, not on purpose, I've actually got a little bit too much oil wash in there. I've now actually put more in. So to compensate for that, I'm just going to dry my brush off by touching the kitchen roll, and then I can go in and just wick off any excess that I want, like so. Now, if you find that you've gone too much on this, it can actually be wiped away. So what we're going to do is we're just going to get a little bit of our neat white spirit, just wick away any excess, and where we don't want the paint we can just wipe away, and that will just start to get rid of that. I don't know if you can see, but it's just started to remove it from his back. So if there's any areas where we didn't want so much, but I'm actually going to fix that in the next step anyway. But that's that done. Right, so what I'm going to do now, I actually don't like that face too much, so I'm just going to put a bit of neat oil in there, and then I'm just going to get my damp brush with just oil wash, just white spirit, and I'm going to just, using pretty much the side of my brush, I'm just wiping some of that away, and that's just going to bring his eyes out a bit more. Okay, and then lastly we're going to do the helmet. Now I think that paint is going to be a little bit too light for the helmet, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop a little touch of black in there just to darken it even further. So this is actually an almost black colour. I think there is a technical name for a black and a blacky brown, but don't know what it is. I'm just going to go over there, and because we've got the gloss varnish on, it's going to try to run away, but it's going to get stuck in the recesses. and I made a little tiny bit of a cock up, and that is that I haven't done his hands, but that's not a problem. So what I'm going to have to do is make some fresh up, because this is quite dark. So get the light brown, and we want to darken that a little bit, don't we? There we go. There you go, that's nice. Nice. Okay, and we'll just run that along his hands. Can you see how it's just picked the detail out on his hands? Okay. And I think that's gone on a little bit too thick. So what I'll do is I'll just get some white spirit. Sorry, I've got it zoomed in too much to show you what I'm doing with the brush, but now not enough to show you what I'm doing with the actual model. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wipe along. I just want to remove what I consider too much. See, his hand is quite dark there, so we'll just run a damp brush over the top. Still don't like his face. It's alright, we'll fix that. Okay. And then I think I might have just taken a bit too much out from his fingers, and we're just going backwards and forwards and just adjusting how we want it. Right guys, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get on and I'm going to do the shirt, and I'm just going to do a cut, and I'm going to show you me doing the shirt. Then we'll do the trousers, and I'll do the whole process with the trousers. Okay, so the last thing I need to do is the trousers, and I'm going to be picking up, let's not use that one, let's use this cobalt blue, which is a very dark blue, and then we just dilute that down. Whoops. And this is why I like kitchen roll everywhere, because I'm always dropping things. So give that quite a heavy dilution. Test it on the kitchen roll. Paint the leg in. I think that's probably too light still, so a little bit of black in there just to darken it down. Bit of white spirit on a damp cloth, just to a damp cloth. Right, there we go. Now, because we have heavily diluted this, oils do take days to dry, but because we've heavily diluted this, it will actually dry a lot quicker. Sometimes in a matter of hours, or even in an hour. But we do have to let it dry, and that is where the patience process comes in. Right, so there's not a lot of heaviness going on in there, but he's done. I'm not happy with his face, to be honest with you, but we will be able to fix that. So as you can see, we've added quite a bit of detail. The arms, I think, have come out really, really nice because the oil has seeped into all of those recesses. The more detail there is, the better it'll come out. The trousers are starting to look really good. I'm happy with those. So yeah, that's fine. So all I can do now is sit and wait, and once that is fully dry, if we're happy with it, we'll then seal all of that in with a matte varnish, which I will do once it's dry. I'll do the matte varnish off camera, and then in the next scene I'm going to teach you, or not teach you, I'm going to show you what we call glazing. Okay, so we have let that dry fully. Usually a few hours to a day will be enough due to my work commitments. This has actually been drying for about 3 or 4 days. So as you'll see, the oil wash has really run into the recesses. There has been a little bit of a mistake. I think the face has come out a little bit dark, but that's really not anything to worry about. We can restore this. So what we want to do now, if you imagine everything as 3 levels, you've got the recessed levels, which have been fully, what's the word I'm looking for? Not highlighted, low lighted. Basically, it's been darkened. What we want to do now is we want to restore all the mid tones, which is the main colour, and then we'll take the colour one level up. We'll just hit some highlights. So I'm going to start with the face. Now the equipment that I'm using in this stage is this is my preference. Some people can just paint normally, but I have my brushes, and I will be using a very small brush because obviously I'm getting into small details. I may switch to a larger brush on some areas, and I have here what's called a wet palette. Now basically what a wet palette is, let me get a cocktail stick. It is a piece of sponge, as you can see there, and there's a little bit too much water in there. I need to drain some off. But on top of that is a piece of, now the company that manufactures this wet palette, they call this a moisture sheet. I call it a baking paper, not greaseproof paper, baking paper. Greaseproof paper is actually waterproof, whereas baking paper isn't. And this will actually, it's quite a little bit porous, and it will allow water to pass through. I'm just going to soak some of that water up. I've put a little bit too much in. You want it damp but not wet. And what we're going to do is we're going to put our paint on there, and we can thin it without thinning all of the water. And also, if we put a lid on it, we can come back to it later on. It stops it from going dry, and we can come back to it later. So I'm going to put a spot of paint on there, just one, because we're not doing a large area. And what we're going to do is we're going to draw a little bit of the paint out, and we're going to push it into the paper. And each time we push that into the paper, it's just going to add a tiny bit of water to it. I've actually got an air bubble in there. Push that out, and we push that into the water. And let me get a piece of paper, and let me move my wet palette so you can see what I'm doing. So pushing this in, pushing it in, pushing it in, working it in, and the more we work it in, the thinner it is. And there we go, guys. That is quite nicely. Oh, you can't really focus, can we? And then if we go back to our original piece of original bit of paint, you see that's a lot thicker. You can't because of the focus. Sorry guys, I'm just trying to get the focus in. So you see that's, it's hard to see. Let me Sometimes it doesn't like zooming in quite so much. So you see it's a lot harder to work with. So what we want to keep doing is just taking our paint, working it into the paper, and it gets a little bit thinner each time until it's really nice and thin. And when it's thinner, it's easier to work with. And there we go. And what we're going to do, let's clean that brush off. We also obviously need our kitchen roll. Always use kitchen roll. And what we're going to do is we're going to take some of our paint. We're just going to knock the very end off, and we're just going to restore. We're going to just restore the parts. Got a bit of fluff on my thumb there. And we're never going right into all the edges. We're leaving the recesses a little bit darker, and we're just restoring the highlights. Now, by keeping these paints thin, what we will do is it will blend the colours. I actually don't like that. It's a little bit. I may actually switch to my Kolinsky sable brushes. They tend to have a little bit of a better point. So all the raised areas, we just restore them. We're not painting the whole face. Sorry guys, I'm actually painting with my glasses off, so I can't see if you can see that. And there we go, with just a couple of strokes we've restored that lightness. Okay, and then we'll do the same on the hands. You can cheat and put a little bit of tiny bit of water directly in. Okay, and then we're not painting all of it, we're just doing the raised areas. We're just restoring that back. Anywhere where the oil has gone, where we don't want it. Using nice thin paints. Because if you really don't want it to cover the paint. You don't want the colour to be too solid. Otherwise you get steps in colour. So we're just going to stroke over there. We don't want to lose that lovely oil wash that we've built up. We worked very hard for that. Okay, we can also use this opportunity to cover up any mistakes. So I don't know if you can see it, but almost on his wrist we have a little bit of blue. So using slightly thicker paint, going to cover that blue up. Okay, and then go over and do another layer if you want. And the more layers you do, this is more of a glaze than anything. So I say, I do apologise, I paint with my glasses off. So I don't know if you can see the difference in those two hands. So this hand is beginning to look a bit more natural. Okay, so now we can move on. I am going to cheat and just use some extra water. As I say, just keep working the paint into the water, into the paper, and every time you touch that paper it will draw just a tiny bit of water up. Okay, and the principle is the same with the brush. And the other good thing about the wet palette is the fact that we can use it to mix paints. So we can put daubs of paint on, and then we can just pull little bits off and mix them together, which is what we're going to do shortly. Just picking up those higher areas. We're not going right deep down. I'm actually using a brush that isn't really that good, to be honest with you. This is a brand new brush, never been used before. Now, if you're not happy with the amount of mid-tone, we can always go in again. But when you go in a second time, don't cover quite as much as you covered the last time. So you're gradually building up a highlight, a transition between colours. Okay, so I'm happy with that. I'm now looking at the face, and I think the face in relation to the hands has gone a little bit dark. So I'm just going to go in with another pass on the face, and I'm just going to keep passing with the face until, so I'm having real trouble with this brush. Okay, so we'll give it another pass on the face. You know what, I'm going to abandon that brush and I'm going to go in with my nice new Kolinsky Sable brush. This one's actually smaller. Another little pass there. A little bit along his nose. Nose, cheeks, forehead. They're the main areas you're aiming for. Okay. So I'm a lot happy with that. So what we're going to do next, we want to lighten that now. And when you lighten, just use a natural colour that you've been using and just use something to lighten it with. Now, it's quite natural to go, oh, I'll add white. I personally think white adds a little bit of a pastel colour to it, and I don't really like it. If you have to go white, try to use a lighter version of the same colour. But ivory works very, very well. It's kind of an off creamy white. And it just stops it from going. Sorry guys, it's dried up on the end. There we go. So what we'll do now is we'll take, I want to use a brush for mixing. We take a little bit of the ivory and we'll just add that in. Now maybe that's gone a little bit too light. So we'll just pick up some of the original tone and we'll add that. Just keep mixing until you come to the colour that you really like. So you've got your original tone next to it. So you don't have to mix all of it. You can make various shades until you find something you're happy with. There we go. I think I found my tone round about the middle there. Okay, so obviously we want to work that paint into the I'm actually going to use a slightly bigger brush. I'm going to use a 3.0 this time. So we're going to work that paint into the paper, and that will get it a little bit thinner. Remember, nice soft transitions we're after, so the thinner the paint, the softer the transition will be. Glasses off because I'm doing close-up work. And now we're just touching areas that require a little bit extra highlight. The eyebrow area, tip of the nose, a little couple of touches on the cheek. And you really don't want to overdo it. You are literally just touching certain areas, and there we go guys. I literally put about 4 or 5 touches, tips of brushes on there, and that's his face done. Okay, now I did actually I personally decided not to do his eyes. I decided to use the oil wash for his eyes, and I did read somewhere, don't bother painting with eyes anything under 35 scale. This is 32 scale, but that's close enough, and I think you'll find that's absolutely fine. Right, so what I want to do now, I want to do the trousers next. That's going to be a little bit trickier because we had a little bit of a homemade paint scheme on that one, and what we'd done is we'd done blue and we'd added a little bit of black to it, and I can't find my black. There, now that's rubber black. I suppose we could get away with a rubber black. So we're essentially going to, it's here. Right, so we're essentially going to use three colours here. We're going to use the dark blue, which is the original colour what you thought the paint would, the trousers would be. We're then going to use a little bit of black, and that black is going to be used to darken that blue to make the colour that we really want. And then I'm going to use the azure blue. Two reasons why I want to use the azure blue is one, I want to lighten it with a blue rather than a white, and secondly, when we come to doing the shirt we'll have the paint all ready for us. So I'll take the blue and I'll just pull it down the palette a little bit. I'll pick up some of that black until we come to something a little bit similar that I'm happy with. Yeah, I think I'm happy with that. It's basically, it's a black with a touch of blue in it. Okay, so clean my brush off. Actually, I'll use some of that water to thin that. So get our paint nice and thin. You can do this on a palette if you want, guys. You don't have to use a wet palette. I just like to, because it just helps me control the paint a little bit better. And if I need to stop and come back later on, I can. Now you may notice I'm painting onto the kitchen roll, and that's just helping me see how thick this paint is. Okay, so let's work on this. So again, I've made a mistake there. So what we're doing is we're just going to paint over this, not going as far as the recesses, leaving those nice and clear. Picking up any highlights, definitely. Using the side of the brush if we need to. And focusing more on the top, because that's where the light source is coming from. And because this is a dark colour, it won't make a massive amount of difference, but you will see some difference. And I didn't want to use this colour, this brush, did I? There we go, that's a better one. Okay. And because this paint is so thin, sorry guys, I'm completely off camera there. I'll just zoom it out a bit. Because this paint is so thin, it's drying really, really quickly, which means it's ready for the next coat almost instantly. Okay. And as you can see, like, I'm not being super exact with it. But what I'm not doing is going right deep down into the recesses. I want to keep that nice oil shade. We're getting this really nice tonal effect building up. Go over it multiple times as you want, as many times as you want, until you've got that tone. But remember that each time you go over an area you've already been through, don't go quite as deep into the recesses as you did last time. There we go. Then we're just starting to build some nice shading up. And it's just a rinse and repeat, guys. Hit the tops of the knees, because that is probably going to be the lightest bit on the knees, on the trousers, because it's a kind of a stretched effect. Okay. and I've got a chance to fix a mistake here. I've gone over a little bit with the blue, sorry, with one of the browns, so I can just fix that now. There, I feel it's a little bit light. There we go, lovely. Right, so now we've fixed the mid-tones, we're now going to bring in a little bit of this azure blue. I'm going to put my glasses back on. And we're just going to lighten it a little bit. So what we're trying to create now is a slightly lighter version of the paint that we had before. Now keep this super thin. Like I say, when you paint with it, you want it to hardly show. Okay, so clean the brush off. Take some of the brush on, paint on my brush, and again, this is going to be a little bit like the face. We're actually looking probably more for dots, unless the detail is super sharp. We're just going to add small amounts, picking out, like there's some lovely folds in his trousers there, so we're going to pick those up. And this is quite a large area, so we may need a couple of passers. Don't forget, guys, that the paint will darken as it dries. It's a very sharp line down his trousers there, so we'll pick that up. A couple of little touches on his knees, because that's where the trousers would have stretched a little bit, and when it stretches it makes it lighter. And I seem to be running out of paint there. And we're just literally flicking, almost like a dry brush action. Very subtle. Any raised areas, we'll just pick those up. And it's one of those situations, guys, where it's not hard, it's just knowing what to do. And if you sort of aim a little bit more to use the side of your brush, that makes it a little bit easier, because by using the side of the brush, it makes it harder for the bristles to fall into the recesses, which is the area that you want to avoid. Okay, if you're not happy, go over and do it again. But again, try not to go quite, leave a little bit of the last pass showing. Okay, I think I'm happy with that. You won't fully know until it's dry, because it does darken a little bit. But if you look at the lower leg, if I can ever get a focus, can you see we've just picked up the folds in his trousers, and that's all we're trying to do. We're just trying to pick up that detail. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is the shirt, and I've already got the blue out, and I'm just going to add a little touch of ivory to that, and that's going to hopefully lighten that. I might need quite a lot. We've got two soft colours there, two colours that aren't really very strong, and I actually forgot to do the blue first, so but that's okay, because we didn't pull all of the paint out. I am cheating and adding water, but if you know you're going to need to thin it down quite a lot, that's okay. And we're effectively doing a glaze here, guys, so we do want it really thin. So I'm going to have to give my brush a really good clean there. Okay, so So remember, what we're doing first is we are restoring the original colour, but we're not going all the way down to the recesses. If we see any mistakes, it's an opportunity to fix it. There doesn't seem to be many mistakes at the moment on this bit, but if we'd have come over with the brown a little bit too much, then we could just go over that. Okay. Now the blue that we've used for the oil is quite dark, so we may actually not want to lighten this too much, because the recesses have been darkened that much. It may actually be overkill. Now this I'm going to have to paint over because we've got a little bit of brown there, so I just want to cover that up. Yeah, so this blue is actually coming out like a highlight colour. So I'm literally going to, when I do the beast with the ivory on, it's literally going to be touches with the tip of the brush. Okay. Also take into account where the light source is coming from. Now, the light source will be coming from above, so you notice I'm not focusing so much on the bottom of the shirt, and I certainly won't be doing the lightened version of the blue on the bottom, just where the light source, so that shoulder blade where there's a bend in his arm, so that's going to stretch the fabric a little bit, so we want to do a little bit of highlight there, top of the shoulder there. Okay, add a bit more if we feel it needs it. And then the difficult bit, we've got the shirt collar, so I'm just going to run the brush down the middle of the shirt collar. I'm not going to go all the way to the edges. We've got a fold on this side, so that makes it a little bit easier. And then I'm going to run it near the top there, and then there's a little fold there that we can pick up. Okay, and then the paint, literally by the time we've done one arm, the paint on the other side of the arm has dried because it's so thin. Okay, so I'm now at the point where I'm dotting it on, just looking for areas that just needs a little bit of help. There we go, and I'm happy with that. I don't want to go overboard. The only drawback with this is the way it's done, because paint darkens as it dries. As you paint it on, it's very tempting to think, ooh, I've overdone it. But then once it dries, you kind of look at it and think, well, I'm not sure if I've done enough. And that's because the paint is so thin. Right, so I'm happy enough with that, if I can get the focus. So we'll look at this paint now that's got the ivory in it, and I want this at least as thin as before, if not thinner. We don't want any difference, obvious colour change differences. So this really is going to be dotting it on, and we're looking for the extreme highlights. I forgot to knock the end off the brush. So just where the highlights will be strongest. As you can see, I'm just literally dotting it on. We can always add more. And I really want a couple of dots on the top of this shoulder, just where the stretch in the fabric is at its maximum. That you'll see I'm not hitting all of it. It is literally dots. Better to do 2 or 3 dots than a couple of bad lines. Don't forget also, so this is going to be hidden a little bit by the cockpit. And there we've got the shirt. A couple of dots on the shirt. So even if you dot it to form a line, That's a lot better than doing a line because it makes it slightly uneven. Okay, and there we go. So there is the shirt, and I'm happy with that. It's got some really nice highlights on that. You may think that's a bit extreme. I quite like it. Right, so one last thing to do. Two last things to do, and that's our browns. So we are going to take, if I can find them, there we go. So we're using two browns. We're using Middlestone and Ochre, and they will lighten up very nicely with the ivory because ivory is a browny colour. It's very, very low down on the brown spectrum, and so this is going to cover us for the seat belts and the life jacket. Remember that the life jacket is unique for Guy Gibson. I believe he stole or obtained a German one. So let's work on the life jacket, because do you remember the rule about doing the lower areas before we do the higher areas? So we look for any areas that would be highlights. So I can actually see that that jacket is done up and there's a little flap, so we'll just cover we'll go up to the jacket, up to the edge, and we'll just bring that back almost to the corners, and then if we're brave enough to go on the other side, we'll just cover it in the middle. There really isn't an awful lot that we can do on this. There isn't that much shown. And I think it's going to be a case of building it up. But I think the extreme highlight is going to work very well on this. Okay, so just restoring that original colour. So you'll see, I don't know if you can see, but we've got some bands there. So we just want to run in between the bands. And if you can't do a straight line, then that's fine. It just creates a bit of an illusion. So if your lines aren't quite straight, it makes it look perhaps he's not sitting straight in the cockpit. His back maybe isn't completely straight. Right, so that's the colour restored. A lot of it is quite flat. So we'll pop a little bit of the ivory into that. Bit more. Just keep working it until we get to a colour that we're happy with. That's nice. Thin it right down. Remember, every time you add paint, you're going to have to thin it again, because the paint is going to thicken it. Because this extreme highlight, we want it thinner than the last layer of paint. Right, so I can now see, again, I can see the edge of this jacket. So I'll just hit that with a little highlight just along the edge. Okay, so you should now see that it's a flap, not a whole piece. We've got 3 buttons down the front. So I'm just going to hit the top of the buttons, like so. And I'm just going to hit the top of the edge there, because there's a sharp edge there. And I think that's all we can really do on that. There's a little bit there with a button, and we'll hit that bit. And then I just want to do that edge again. I think now that it's dried, it's gone a little bit dark, so I just want to restore it a little bit. Say this is, I think scale modelers would, this is more like a filter I'm just going to go a little bit across the edge there near the top, like so. I mean, we're not even going to see this bit, so, and then a little bit along there. It just defines the edges. It's pointless doing the back actually. Right, there we go. So look, not much to do on that one, but it definitely adds to it. Okay, so lastly we've got seat belts, and same as before, this is just a repeat and repeat and rinse. Rinse and repeat. I knew I'd get there eventually. So nice thin paints, and reinforcing the colour that might have been darkened by the oil. So we're going to go almost the full length, and again on this side, get that buckle, and then along the top. And that's just adding a third dimension to it. So instead of being a two-dimensional model, it's very three-dimensional. Okay, and I think, oh, there's a little bit that I've called belts on the front. So we're going to try and get that almost the full length. There we go, and then this bit down there. And I've got a little bit on his leg. A little bit of brown on his leg, so with a moistened brush I'm just going to paint that away with just plain water, because I don't want that staying there. Right, so happy with that. Bit of ivory, we'll lighten that up, because as I say, I think, in my opinion, when you add white, it makes it look, especially with the blues and the reds, see, if you add white to red, it makes it very pink, which obviously isn't what we're after. It really depends on the colour that you're dealing with. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to touch the highlights. So where this little strap is just bending over, it's just going to add a little bit of three dimension, and we'll catch a little bit down there, because that's where I think it just stands out. And then the buckle, where the strap meets the buckle, we'll just pull that down a little bit, just a little bit, and then the buckle, but that doesn't go as far. There we go. And then I'll try and catch just one side of this seat belt. There we go. And we'll wait for that to dry a little bit, and do you know what, I think that's okay. I think we got that one in one. Right, I'm gonna catch, I know we've done the life bit, but I want to just catch those buttons again. I want to just bring those out even more. And then these two little straps that goes down between his groin, we'll just do the bend. And I'm sorry about being off camera, guys, but I think that's starting to come together. And it turns out we do actually have one more, and that's the chocolate brown, which I haven't got my glasses on, so I can't find that bottle anywhere. Right, so that's olive drab. That's not the colour. This is not the colour we are looking for. Right, guys, I might have to come back. Oh, no, this could be it. No, that's a black. Okay, just how disorganised I am on my table, guys. Right, I'm going to take a cut. Okay, so for the chocolate on the helmet, I decided to go ahead without you. So I've just reinforced the chocolate colour, and then I've added, instead of adding ivory, I actually added in some of the dark flesh, just so it didn't go down quite so much. And I've just picked out a few highlights, and then that mix with the dark tan, I then added a little bit of ivory, and I just literally hit about 4 or 5 dots, one on the mask there. You can just see on the bridge of the nose he's got what looks like a bit of shine. That's actually paint. So a little bit on the earpieces, and a little bit on the straps. Just sort of break that up and define it. So I'm calling that guy done. Guy Gibson, the Guy Gibson, is done as far as I'm concerned. I'm happy with that. It's not the best job in the world. I know there's people out there that can do a lot better, but I'm happy with that result. So what are we doing next week? I actually can't remember. I'll tell you what's actually happening. I've got myself so far ahead that I can afford to take a few weeks off. My work does see me in London. So while this is being released, I'm probably back from London and I'll have worked on something else. I'm still waiting for some parts to arrive. Hopefully by the time I work on the next issue, those parts will have arrived, and I'll be able to get on with things. But there you go, guys. That's managed to draw this out for 2 episodes. That's my Guy Gibson. I hope Guy Gibson, if he was alive today, he would be proud of that. So I'll try and get you as many different angles as I can. Like I say, I didn't focus so much on behind because I'm working on the light coming from the front. But yeah, I'm happy enough with that. A lot of equipment going on in the front, straps and buttons. You see, I've now defined that as it's more of a jacket than a pullover kind of effect. But yeah, I'm happy with that. And his face isn't so dark now because we've added that flesh back on. The wash, I think maybe I used a little bit too much of a dark wash. It certainly darkened his eyes. But I haven't painted his eyes, that's just wash. So hopefully, if you've ever been a little bit scared to do figures, I know this is a big figure and thus a little bit easier. You see the detail on the back of the jacket there, and that's just by adding a little line of light, something lighter. You can see some creases on there. So hopefully, I really hope that there's some of you watching this that before you watch this thought, no, I can't paint figures, and now that you've seen this, you'll grab some figures and have a go. And I'll be honest with you guys, the best way to have a go, if you're in the UK, there's a shop nearby called Poundland, and they sell cheap Chinese junk. That's basically the best way to describe it. One of the things that I picked up from them the other week was a pack of toy soldiers. You got about 100 plastic soldiers for £1.50, I think it was, £1, £2, something in that region. It's the kind of price that if you've never painted figures, you could buy these, paint the figures. You're not necessarily after painting a nice figure, you're after learning about picking up these highlights. 100 figures for, if it was a £5, isn't that worth having a go on? And if you're not happy with the paint, just dunk this in alcohol and all that paint will strip off and you'll be back to where you begun. Right, that's it for me, guys. So let's go over to the costings. Take care. So issue 8, we have got I don't know why I've put 13th of September there. That's the wrong date, but I'll correct that for the next issue. So issue 8, we have a Hachette cost of £10.99 there, which is bringing the total cost so far £74.92. Because I'm continuing with the pilot, obviously there's no cost for me this week, which remains the cost at £471.41. I will say this from time to time, this figure there, £377.92, is what I would say is the compulsory cost of this model. That's the paints and all the things that I've had to buy, the model, the paints, the primer, the glue and the varnish. Why have I bought? Oh no, I bought 2 varnishes. The crew obviously is sorry, that's something else. So the crew is obviously extra, and then things that I bring in future weeks will be extra. So we are running at a loss so far of £396.49. So let's give it a rating. I'm going to give this a rating of 1. for Hachette. Hachette are in a bit of a catch-22. They produce some nice parts. They're restricted by the total cost of it to produce each magazine. So if they give you larger parts, for example a big old piece of metal fuselage, then obviously they're going to give you less pieces in other areas. So obviously you're not going to get as much with this issue, which some people are going to see as a negative. Secondly, you can't make bright colourful parts if those colourful parts don't actually exist on the actual model. So the parts are a little bit samey in colour, they're all dark colours, and there is nothing you can do about that, because you know, I'm sure they'd like to use all the colours of the rainbow, but then everyone would say it's unrealistic. So that's why I'm only giving it a 1. It is good, it's definitely worthy of points, but there's not an awful lot to do. Now, my pilot, I'm being biased here, I know. I'm going to give it a 2. I think once you put those oils on, which didn't cost a lot of money, I haven't put them into the costings, but that entire set of oils cost me a £5, and I've just had them lying around for quite a while now. They'll last me probably most of the rest of my life. But I think that the oil and then the painting on top has really made that detail pop, and I bet you'll never get any part works with models with figures that detailed. So I am being a little tiny bit biased, I'll admit, and I'm giving it a 2. That means that after 8 issues, the scoring system that I've used has them level pegging at 13 all, which I do think is fair. I think at this stage of the build, there isn't an awful lot between them. Anyway, that's it for me for this week. Next week, I'm showing you another aftermarket part, which I firmly believe is going to completely blow you away. So please don't miss the next issue. Hit the like button if you think this was a good video. Hit the subscribe button and notifications so that when next week's video comes out, you won't miss it. And I'm absolutely positive you will love it. So take care, guys. Till next week. Bye-bye.